Nothing wrong with being a hip-hop channel. I'm just saying I'm not a hip-hop channel. That's the first order of business, so to speak. I have my little list of things to try and get through on this video. Thanks for all the interaction over the past couple of weeks. I'm having fun with it. It's a lot of fun. I figured out how to turn off the face tracking, so hopefully it's still in focus and all that. I'm going to try and cover a bunch of things real quick. I have something set up in Pro Tools to show you the little way of putting together the triggered sine wave to fatten up your kick drums. It basically was the way we used to make an 808 back in yesteryear. But it's kind of a cool way. It's all, that's what an 808 is doing, is playing a sine wave. So let's see here. I have some stuff. So the comments, good stuff. One guy says, no jump cuts, screaming, or nonsense. Just awesome content, exactly like I had the opportunity to sit in the studio with you. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine about it. This is like me taking a break from being at the desk and turning around to my assistant or maybe the producer or whatever, and we were just taking some time to just chill and talk about stuff, regarding tracking or recording or production or making a beat or whatever. You got to have one of these pens, by the way. You got to have the multicolored pen, the retro, made in France, Bic. It's important. It had a lot to do. So, yes, I'm not going to be doing any jump cuts. I tried some of that stuff like a while ago, some of my older videos, and besides the fact that it was annoying to me to try and do it all, like clean up every stammer or end or whatever, I'm not comfortable just watching it back myself even. And when I see someone else's video now with 9 million jump cuts, I'll listen if it's comfortable to listen to. But I mean, I think these things are trendy either way. Like for a while seems to be all jump cuts. Now I will cut out a sneeze or a cough or a gag or something like that, so you don't have to deal with that. Anyway, so that's that one. One guy asked me, what were the most typical EQs? I'm not going to use anybody's name associated with these, just for the sake of I don't think I need to call anybody out, especially if I say hey, your question is dumb, which I won't, maybe. What were the most typical EQs used for drum samples? SSL or rack mount stuff? It was, listen, generally speaking, everything was recorded through the desk, because unlike today where you can just dial up 9,000 plugins, like I could dial up this plugin of the SSL, or I have a VR plugin or something like that, or whatever. It was like you didn't have a million options. You had a room with, let's just say, a 72 channel SSL. So you had 72 mic pre's that were, at the time, if you did the math, they were $10,000 each, because a 72 channel SSL would be easily $700,000. So the studios themselves would have a console, anywhere upwards of like $1 million console. There weren't external mic pre's in the room, and I'll get to why there weren't. There were maybe 2 LA2As in the room, like real LA2As. 2 LA2As. If you walked into a typical Hit Factory room or Quad or Right Track, Record Plant, even the LA ones, you would see like 2 LA 2As, maybe 2 LA 3As if you were lucky, a couple of 1176s. These are all on the compression tip. There might be 2 Pultecs in the room for some of that vintage EQ kind of thing. But the mic pre thing was typically a rental. And when we started, like say with hip hop and R&B even for that matter, those sessions didn't want to hear that you were renting gear to just add to the cost of what they were doing. And a mic pre could be pretty expensive. And then, you know, if you rented some compressor, there was always a DBX in the room too, like 160, one of my favorites, the regular 160. Now, as things got more successful and also things started evolving on a competitive tip amongst engineers, then we would start renting gear to sort of amp up the show. So yes, would I rent a couple of Neve 1073s to do vocals and to track through? Yes. But getting back to the drums, generally speaking, those were right into the console through the mic pre's to tape. Now, that brings up another side of it, was that most producers did not want you messing with their sounds to tape. So in other words, you're working with, I don't know, anybody. Just think of any hip-hop dude that I've mentioned or R&B dude that I've mentioned. You didn't start messing with their sounds at the desk to tape, because that would immediately cause alarm for them, because these were their sounds and this was part of the whole thing. This was part of their production. Now, as you had relationships with these people, they would trust you. You know, if you built up some trust and said like, hey, I'm just going to do what I don't always do with your beats to fatten them up to tape. All of these things always bring up like new stuff. And the other reality was, and this is a big reality, is that a lot of guys didn't like to EQ and compress to tape, because if you were jockeying to or positioning yourself to be the mixer, you didn't want to give away your sound to tape so that someone else would get a tape that had all of your shined up sounds on tape, for them to just go, wow, you know, this kick drum sounds really good and this snare drum sounds really good. So generally speaking, you printed without anything, and then you did all the post processing in the mix stage or in the playback stage. So you would have half the console set up typically. You know how the consoles have like a center section and it goes like 1 through 24, and then there's a center section, and then 25 through whatever. 25 through whatever used to be like typically all the inputs, 25 through 48. And that would be, you know, each channel of the MPC 1 through 8. And then maybe the 1080 or the S950, like someone mentioned. And then that stuff would all get bussed to tape on individual tracks. 1 through 24 would come back, channel 1 through 24. And you'd be starting from there. You'd be post-EQing and post-compressing and doing all that kind of thing. So that you had your maybe you had your little tricks and secrets, whatever you had on the inserts and things like that. There's a lot to it. So I guess I won't run out of material anytime during the next 50 videos if I make it that long. So another one was, oh, this is a pretty good question. Can you speak a bit on when things transition to digital? You mentioned in another video about buying a Tribe Called Quest on vinyl, but I fear that most modern releases of classic hip hop on vinyl are cut from digital files regardless. You know, that is the case. A lot of vinyl that's out now is literally being cut from a CD. And I've heard this on audiophile channels. It's hard to find vinyl that's actually truly from the 2-track master. So to work around that, to make the test that I'm proposing by saying like, find something that's truly analog and then see what happens when you put modern mastering on it. I think you could kind of do it from the CD even, because take one that's not mastered to vinyl, get the CD and just see what's really going on there, because those weren't crushed. I mean, it's really going into the weeds. I mean, you still have to sound modern now, and things have to be mastered like they're coming out today or, next year. Speak to the sonic quality when comparing software to hardware pieces. Oh, so can you hear the difference between plug-in versions of EQs and limiters and compressors to the actual hardware or even 500 series gear? Yeah, they sound different. And for that matter, every LA2A has some sonic differences. I'm not saying I'm like, Professor Golden Ears or something like that, but like everything's different. And these digital recreations are pretty damn close. There's some that are like frighteningly close to me, and good and workable. The bottom line is like, let's just say if you gave me a hardware distressor, one of my favorite compressors, and the plug-in version of the distressor, the empirical, whatever they are. Could I dial in the basically something that I'm completely happy with on the plug-in compared to the hardware version? Yes, I'll be dead honest. I don't know if that was the case 20 years ago when these plugins first started happening. I think they were a little more raw. So I have a funny story because the RZA thing keeps coming up, which is, that I said that he used an Akai MPC 3000 at one point, or maybe a 60. When I worked with him, I'm trying to clear this up a little bit. It had to be 96 or 7, because I've did a little detective work myself on it and actually found something very surprising. If you were to ask me, so I worked with RZA for 1 month straight in Studio B at the old Hit Factory, 237 West 54th Street, New York City. I didn't know RZA. I had done the Iron Man mix before this month of all things RZA. So I meet RZA at the studio for the first time, and it's very much like, hey, what's up? He wanted a paper sign on the door of the control room, which was, in those days, you had to go through like a door to get into a sound lock, which was like a little hallway. And then one door led to the control room, the other door led to the live room. Studio B was a small SSL, 60 channel. Really cool little room, intimate. Paul Simon used to love working in there. That was like when I first came through the hit. He was in there for months. So anyway, it's me and RZA. And what is RZA doing? He's going through all of his old tapes, ADAT tapes and other tapes. He was, according to him, he was putting together a Wu-Tang best, like classic things that haven't been released or something like that. I don't remember exactly his words. And I didn't know a lot about Wu-Tang at the time. I mean, like I said, I hadn't even done the Iron Man thing yet. But he had an SP1200 in there, and I'm 99% sure that there was an Akai in there, whether it was a 60 or a 3000. I don't know if the 3000 was out yet. But anyway, I don't remember what he exactly messed with. I know we put up ADATs. We were transferring stuff to 24-track tape. We were doing all kinds of stuff. And this was just me and him in the room daily. And I'm talking like noon to 11 p.m. or something like that. A couple of people came through here and there. And one of the things that happened, which whenever I hear the name RZA, I think of one thing. Check the mic lines for wiretaps, which I recorded him, and I couldn't remember what it was on. And I looked it up. I actually Googled it yesterday, and it was this DJ Muggs came in, and I didn't know him at the time either, from Cypress Hill. He came in, he was doing Soul Assassins, and I guess that was his beat. And I recorded RZA and Jizza on that. I don't remember if I recorded the other vocal, and I don't even know who the other vocal was. I couldn't tell you. I listened to it yesterday. I definitely didn't do the mix. I think I would have remembered mixing it. I think it was just a case of Muggs came in, had the beat. We may have laid the beat. RZA did that vocal, and I remember it because he was like, I think he was literally, from what I remember, he was holding an a 57 or a 58 handheld, and he was doing that vocal, and it was quite entertaining. I'm gonna cut it there. Oh, the one last little tidbit on this whole RZA quantize, not quantize, still a quantize. This brought to my, dug it up from my memory, is that there were several times when RZA was going through these tracks that he had that had beats. There was like a beat with a sample and this and that. He would play kick and snare live on the pads, and we would record that to tape. And he generally would get all the way through the whole 4 or 5 minutes doing his beat on the pads. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's pretty loose. It's good, but it is loose. I mean, it's really someone playing the pads, and that is with no quantize.